Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of Faith and Culture. And today we have Point Loma Nazarene University head men's basketball coach and Skyline church member, Justin Downer. Justin, welcome.
Thanks for having me. Excited to be here.
Man, so glad to have you on. And of course, I love basketball. We have a lot of people who love basketball, but more than that, man, you got quite a story. As I've been getting to know you, and it's encouraging to hear, and I think other people need to hear it as well. So I want to start with your upbringing.
Yeah.
Like, tell me about where you grew up, and then your family life, and all the way into either how you came to Christ.
Yeah.
Even.
Absolutely. I always tell people I'm a small town kid. I grew up in a town of about 4,000 people, 45 minutes east of Seattle, Washington. Pretty humble upbringing. Didn't have a little, didn't have a lot, but. Grew up in a very small, close-knit community. Everybody knew each other. You went to the grocery store and you saw your math teacher, and sometimes you ducked down aisle 12 because you saw your math teacher. And
was everybody in everybody's business?
Yeah. Oh,
kinda?
yeah.
Like everybody knew what was going on.
It wasn't even like that wasn't even a concept. Of course you're in everybody's business. Like it's not like, dang, that person knows my business. Like, of course that person knows your business. And so grew up in that. It was a really cool childhood to play with my basketball teammates were my baseball teammates. My dad coached the soccer team. My other friend's dad coached the baseball team, and so on and so on. And so that was great. And then ended up my parents split when I was in middle school, and so that was hard at times. Being in a small town, there just wasn't a lot of that. And so I thought I was a little bit unique in that sense, but I had sports, and so that was great. And so ended up, living a majority of the time with my dad, and then ended up in a situation where I kind of was in and out of, being on my own. I had to transfer high schools at one point. And so I ended up going to my junior year somewhere else and living with my aunt and uncle, and really wanted to graduate with the kids I grew up with, and so I ended up living with a buddy my senior year. But along the way, as adversity came and as my life took a little bit of a different trajectory than maybe my peers, I saw basketball as a way to get out. A lot of where I grew up, like, you just end up there when you're in those small towns, and there's nothing wrong with that. I've got a lot of good friends that are doing great things in my hometown, but I wanted to get out. I wanted to get more, and I saw basketball as that opportunity, and worked really hard at it. I wasn't a great player in high school. I wasn't an above. I was constantly barely making the team, and then as I got to be an upperclassman, I finally turned it, and I was a big part of the team. And we had a group of guys that grew up playing together that was great. But what I found was, especially in those years where I was going back and forth, like, what high school am I going to? Where do I live? What's next for me? Everything was the highs and lows of basketball. Mm-hmm. And so I grew up, Seattle area basketball, you're playing against talent every night. It's an awesome high school community. There's a bunch of awesome leagues, tournaments. And so if I played against a good player and I had a good game, like, man, this is me. This is my life. And I'm on the highs. And whatever came with that, and growing up in a small town as a high school kid. And then when it didn't go well and I put the work in, and this is what I'm going to identify as, it got really low. With some of the things going on in my family life, with, as a student, I was working a retail job, 40 hours a week in the summer, 20 hours a week during the season. And so it was like, I'm going to take electives, and I'm going to get D's and C's, and my path is either junior college or scholarship anyway. And so some of those lows got really low, and I really struggled with my mental health, and with getting my identity into a certain point where, I thought when basketball got really dark, when I was putting in a ton of work, that it just wasn't worth it anymore, and had some suicidal thoughts, and plans. And fortunately for me, I had some people in my life, some camps that I had attended in my life that kind of took me and said, there's something else there. And so that's really how I came to the Lord and to be introduced to my faith growing up.
So you mentioned mental health, and that's a big topic for us in terms of how we're trying to help people consistently. And it's a big topic, obviously, in our culture right now, all-time high when you talk about anxiety, depression. You look at the different prescriptions that are being pushed and being prescribed at record levels. You went through it. What was some of the keys for you? How'd you get out of it? How did you be able to, I'm not sure the word I'm looking for, but how did you really get out of that?
Yeah, I think while you're on that topic, my best friend's mom worked in the counseling department. Like, people knew what was going on in my life. But even with that being said, back then, that was 15 years ago now, it was at a way different place than it is now. I had people telling me I was bipolar. I had people telling me that I needed to get on bipolar medication, and I'm like, if you say so, but none of it stuck, none of it made sense. No one could tell a personality disorder this. Like, really, I was a kid that identity was wrapped up in the wrong thing. And so what I was really fortunate is I had a really close friend. As I share this story, there's a handful of people on earth that know what I went through that were shoulder to shoulder with me that whole time. And I had one friend that I was comfortable sharing that with. And I'd kind of shared my experiences and shared that I was, this is a decision that I was going to make, that I no longer had a place here. My time, there's no light at the end of the tunnel. And they said, look, why don't you come to church with me a few times, give it a chance, and then reevaluate. And to their credit, it was kind of their only play, because if they would have came at me like, no, this is going to change your life, this is going to fix it all, I would have been like, save it. Yeah. And so, I went a couple times, and, I think we all hear these testimonies that are awesome, and we all hear these like lightning bolt, and then God came and I was fixed forever. And those are cool, but the reality is there was a ton of highs and lows from there. Mm-hmm. Some of the messages I went to at church were great, and some of them were like falling on deaf ears, like, this is a waste of my time. And then, finally, I came, luckily for me, I'd actually got invited to a church that I was familiar with. Mm-hmm. My parents had grown up bringing me to church, but that was what we did on Sundays. Mm-hmm. And so I walked in the first couple days, and it's the same youth pastors that I had seen when I was a youth group member when I was 10. And they're like pumped to see me. And I'm like, dude, that's weird. I haven't talked to you in 6-7 years. And kind of the final straw for me was, there was a sermon that was delivered centered on Romans 8:28 through 38. And being the competitive person that I am, anyone who knows that verse, I mean, just this concept that God is on my team and I no longer can lose. Mm-hmm. I was just like, well, there's got to be something there to that. And so it was super surface level at first, but it made me feel something for the first time, that it's not basketball, it's not getting out of my small town, it's not anything other than pursuing this. And if this is the winning team, if this is the winning score, then I want to be on that team, because I want to win. And that's really how it grabbed me, and God placed it on my heart, and since then I've kind of structured my life around it.
So take us from that point. You're still, obviously basketball is a thing. It just, when you were saying that, it reminded me, we say all the time, an invite can change a life. And that's what happened. That's another story, another example of someone saying, just come and see. When you look in Scripture, there wasn't anyone forcing someone to do something. It was the constant, hey, come and see. Come check it out, And that's what this person, it sounds like, or these people were doing for you. Just come check it out and we'll see what happens, right?
Yeah.
And that made a big difference.
Well, I think it's also worth noting, anyone who knows me at 16 years old, it wasn't like, cool, let me try it. It was like, huh? I got this figured out. What are you talking about? It wasn't come to church, okay, let me give this a shot. It was, I'm going to come to church. I'm probably talk trash about church on my way to church. I'm going to probably talk trash about church on my way home from church. And then one day it was like, holy cow, I'm an idiot.
Wow.
I got it wrong. And so I think a lot of times, and I feel like this, being in basketball, right? And so now I'm in a place, I'm in a profession where I'm literally watching these people who are me, and maybe they're not as far down the path as I got, and maybe they are. You don't know. I think a lot of people didn't know where I was at. But the invites usually come to the people that are like, oh, now it's time to invite you. Oh, now he's starting to talk about God. He's starting to talk about Jesus. He's starting to talk about relationship. Now come to Skyline with me. But I was in a place where I was like, no way, no chance. And I still got invited, and I said, well, maybe.
What made you say maybe? I mean, that you're kind of antagonistic, if you will, towards it. It's not something you're interested in. What made you go, okay, to prove it wrong, or what do you think it was?
I thought the person that invited me was living a life and had a family dynamic that I respected a lot. And so it's the way I live a lot of my ways, especially in hoops, especially, working with young males that are trying to change their lives through basketball. This person was living everything that they were telling me to experience. And so by example, you're like, well, you're pretty happy. Well, your family does pretty well. You guys do cool things. Mm-hmm. That just being a living example of it that's what caught my interest. Mm-hmm. It was like, okay, it's working for you guys. Let's see if it can work for me.
I'll give it a try. Yeah, no, totally understand that. That's definitely one way that I came to Christ too, was a guy on my team. The way he treated his wife, the way his family was, same thing. You're looking at it, and I grew up, everybody's, divorces and all this stuff, and you're going, that didn't work, so let me see what you're doing. So total example is a big deal too. So what from there, it's starting to come alive in you a little bit. You're starting to figure stuff out faith-wise. You're still, if basketball is still a thing, what's going on at this point?
Yeah, so this is going into kind of this transfer season that I'm talking about of my life. And so without that, I don't know what happens. God's timing is amazing, because I end up transferring high schools the following year and then end up transferring back. And being as prideful as I was and not wanting to let people in, I grew up in a town of 4,000 people. The 10 best players in town from 10 years old played together till they were 18. So when I transferred high schools, people thought I was walking out on them. Like, these are some of my deepest, closest friends. To this day, probably don't. So transferring was hard. Transferring back it wasn't my guys like, welcome back. It was like, now I'm the other guy on the side of those guys walking down the hall. And, okay, my teammates aren't going to say hi to me today.
Yeah.
Okay, I got screened really hard in practice this week, and I wouldn't let them in. And so I think it was really hard for me, because I still think I was at a place now where mentally I wasn't going to the places that we talked about. But I was still in pain because of what I experienced. And I was treating people like I was in pain. And so the people closest to me at the time would say, oh, you don't know them well enough, right? Like, I would treat my friends, the people I considered family, like gold. And people were like, how could you be friends with that guy if they weren't friends with me? Because if you weren't in that circle, get out. Why? I didn't trust anybody.
Yeah.
So now I've got to figure out, I'm getting myself in trouble with my mouth. I'm getting myself in trouble, getting into situations I shouldn't be in. And I thought I had a fairly good moral standing, but at the same time, I wasn't treating people well. Well, fortunately for me, I had grown up going to a basketball camp that was Christ-centered. And so every summer, I'm getting hit hard for 7 to 10 days with all this stuff. And it's kind of like, God, plant seeds. At the time, it was like, I'd leave camp, I'd execute it for 2 weeks, school would start, and I'm back to the same guy at school. And so from there, where it really turned for me as a Christian was actually after I graduated high school. My junior and senior year, I went to high school youth groups, and I was there, but it was two different lives.
Yeah.
I was the high school varsity basketball player, and I was the kid that went to youth group on Tuesday nights. And those two guys were not the same person. But when I started working these camps through a camp called NBC camps, Northwest Basketball Camps, now I started working it. That's when it changed my life. And I started seeing little me's. And I started seeing kids like me. I'm like, oh my gosh, stop, run the other way, do something else, don't do this. And then, at those camps, when, and it's not unique to NBC camps, it's not unique to basketball camps, right? You have these Christ-centered camps throughout, whether it's basketball, soccer, whatever it is, guitar, Christian camp, whatever it is. You're building these connections, you're having these hard conversations. And so now at night, we would do these discussion groups. We'd have guest speakers. We'd have people speaking to the campers. But all of a sudden, I'm like, nope, you're talking to me. Like, I got to go through this. And so we're doing exercises, and we're holding ourselves accountable. And now I'm in a leadership role. That's when I started, and it all came out. And this pain, I'm leading these camps. I'm like a 19-year-old college basketball player, and my 11-year-old little team is like, dang, Coach Downer's crying, and I'm just letting it out, and I'm hurting, and so some of the most powerful nights of my life are just spent with these strong Christian leader basketball coaches that are like, dude, you got to get this out, and you've got to forgive these people. I'm like, forgive these people? Do you know what they put me through? And you've got to live like this, and we've got to talk about building habits this way and looking at it at a different perspective. And it all changed for me. The founder of NBC Camps, Fred Kroll, who was so hard on me at the time. I thought that was the most interesting part of the story, is it wasn't the head of this camp that's like, hey, Justin, come here under my shoulder. It's like, dude, you feel sorry for yourself? Like, you have all this going for you, and you have the Bible right in front of you, and you have these people with you, and you're gonna feel bad. Like, we gotta go, man. We gotta get our stuff right. And the biggest thing that changed my life really was that he told me every week I worked for him, like, you don't have to raise the family you were raised in. You get to do it different. Like, you get that opportunity. You can't control that, but you get to control what's next. And so my identity became, at 19 years old, I'm gonna build myself into the man so that I can attract the wife, and I can be the dad and father so that I can give what I didn't have. Yeah. And so through those different experiences, I end up, some of those, the people in my life at those camps are the most important people in my life now. I met the best man at my wedding, sharing a dorm room in Auburn Adventist Academy, somewhere in the middle of nowhere, Washington. And those people, I thought, again, did a great job of not only supporting me and encouraging me in my faith, but also held me to a standard. And so once I knew the standard, once I knew, we're going into freshman, sophomore year of college now, I'm 3 years into my faith journey. No. You don't get excuses anymore. Yeah. And so I thought that was equally as important.
Where were you in college at this point? Where'd you go to college? And tell us a little about your college experience.
Yeah, so I ended up playing at Skagit Valley College in Mount Vernon, Washington, about an hour and a half north of Seattle for 2 years. It was a good experience. I always say junior college is somewhere where you're glad you went and you never go back. And so I learned a lot there. And then from there, that's where I became a real player. I think we all think we're real players in high school, and then you get on that college grind, and then you figure out who's who real quick, especially in a place like Mount Vernon where there's nobody there. It's one of those Midwest junior college towns where, I even had a house on the lake, but it wasn't a cool lake, but it was on a lake. And so from there, I kind of got to shape who I was as a player and a person. I got to start over, right? Talking about growing up in a small town, who I was in third grade was who I was in 11th grade. Hey, remember when you did this when you were in second grade? Dude, come on, that was 10 years ago. And so I got to be who I was now trying to be in junior college, and I fell on my face a ton, and I still wasn't near what I would have hoped, but I got to learn through that. And then from there, I centered my entire college decision to transfer to a four-year university around going to a Christ-centered university. And so, I told my junior college coach at the time, like, I'm not interested in state schools. I'm not interested in anywhere without warm weather. So I'm going to California. Here's the list of schools. And it's funny how it works when you look back at it, because my sophomore year, I'd worked hard enough to be kind of the feature player on our team. And I had put in the work, done all this stuff. I was the best player on the team, and I hurt my foot. And they couldn't figure out, and they ended up figuring out that the fracture was not in my ankle, it was actually in my heel bone, which was super rare. And with junior college resources, who knows? Yeah, you got an ankle sprain, man, figure it out.
Yeah.
And so I flirt back and forth in terms of, am I going to medical redshirt? Am I going to play? And then I end up playing it out. Well, my recruitment nosedives, but this one random school named William Jessup University, who I was clowning in this fall, like, these guys keep calling me, like, you think I'm going to William Jessup? What kind of school has two names as their school? And so I end up there, and I'm fired up. I'm going to chapel. I get to live everything. It's not just church on Sundays and a couple Bible studies in a junior college closet. And so I go there, and things get really weird fast. I end up having to redshirt, because those of us who have gone to public school to private school understand the credits don't transfer as you'd hope. And so I was not near being able to graduate in 2 years, so I decided to use my redshirt year, and my coach gets put on administrative leave halfway through the first semester. Wow. And at this point in my life, I'm now a halfway decent person. I'm treating everybody fairly well. I'm not letting everybody in, but I've got a fairly good head on my shoulders, but the trust thing is still there. And so now the guy I trust is not the head guy, and now I'm out of here because this is not going my way. And so it's funny how God works, because at the time, my wife and I had just started talking. And I told her, I'm transferring. There's no point in dating.
So you're not dating, not your wife yet. You just started to meet, you just met her.
Yeah.
Started dating.
Yeah.
You met her at William Jessup.
Met her there.
Yeah.
So she was on the women's team. I was on the men's team. We kind of figured it out. Small campus, 800 undergrad on campus. Everybody knows that me and her are on this collision course, but it's not there yet. And I'm transferring. So let's not do it. And out of nowhere, they rehire my coach. And now he's the head coach again. So I canceled my visits for spring break. I'm not going back up. No. And being in California, I'm going home. I'm going back to the Northwest, which, looking back, would have been the worst thing for me. I would have never been out of my comfort zone. And so I end up staying, and then they fire him again in like June. And now I'm like raging. Like, that poor athletic director had to hear from me that day when he announced to the team. And I was like, this is crazy. And so they don't hire a new head coach until mid-July, and I'm stuck at William Jessup. What am I going to do? And so I end up playing there, but I end up with a degree because you had to get a degree in a minor in Bible and theology. And at the time, I'm going through and I'm writing these awful exegeses because my major's in psychology and I'm a basketball player, and I'm gonna write this because you're making me, but like this is crazy that you're gonna make me do this. And now I look back almost 10 years from graduation and I go, I met my wife. I have some of the best friends in the world. I go through all of these college experiences, this playing career that was less than desirable on my end, but I gained a minor in Bible theology out of it. And now as we enter the culture wars that we're in, especially where we live, man, I'm so happy that my spirituality is an emotional high. Yeah. It's not getting invited to church and just being like, well, God's on my team, and so I can't lose. I need a lot more bullets in the chamber than that. Mm-hmm. And so now I've got this, 30 credit minor in Bible and theology that I'm like, no, I learned about this. I wish I would have paid more attention, but that's in my toolkit.
That's a fact, isn't it? You're in California, you're front lines, especially when you're you know, you're at a Christian school, and you've got young men that you're really mentoring. You know, when you think about that, and we'll talk about that in a moment. But it is incredible. You don't realize how much of what maybe you're resistant to it at a time, but God's going to use that in such a big way in our culture today with the stuff that is going on, California especially, but it's obviously spreading all throughout our nation. So talk to us about your family now. So you mentioned that you met your wife there. Tell us a little bit about that, and then your family now.
Yeah, absolutely. So my wife and I have been married just 4 years last week. Really proud of the way we built our marriage. I mean, we've been married 4 years, but the story I'm telling you was 11 years ago now. Mm-hmm. And so we walked into each other's life 11 years ago, and man, it hasn't been perfect, but it's been fun, and we have grown so much together, but we didn't just go get married. Like, I went and figured out how to get a career in basketball, and she went to grad school and got a master's degree from Loma as an occupational therapist. And we really focused on, if we're actually putting each other first, we're going to go for it. And we were able to build a life that, if we would have gotten married straight out of college, there's no way we'd have the life we had. And, I'm proud of that. And so we got married right before we moved to San Luis Obispo. I took a job at Cal Poly, and so we spent our first 3 years of marriage up in San Luis Obispo. And
you're coaching at Cal Poly?
Yeah, I was coaching at Cal Poly up there, and up there was we got to be a young married couple up in the Central Coast, which was awesome. And then my wife gave birth to our son Jackson, who's now 2.5, and so he was born up there. And then Christmas Eve this past year, we were blessed with a baby girl. Came on Christmas Eve, Taylor Grace, and so she's about 8.5 months now.
That is fantastic. So you're coaching there, and what happens to get you to your next spot? What was your next spot? Tell us that process a little bit. And even, that's not a Christian school.
Sure.
So how are you feeling there? What's the struggles, and what got you down here in San Diego, or your next spot?
So as I'm going through my story, basically what I've decided by the time, first of all, I always wanted to coach. I coached my first team when I was 13 years old. I was an 8th grader. I was coaching 4th graders. I remember the record.
We were to coach. You were going to coach. Yeah.
And so at 18, after working these camps, that's what I'm going to do. And I wanted to run the camps. And I ended up being a direct site director. At 20 years old, I can't believe it. Parents were dropping their kids off for me, and I was directing a camp at 20. The same kid that I just described. And they're like, hey, here's my kid for 4 nights. And so I wanted to be the local high school coach in a town similar to the one I grew up in, but not the one I grew up in. And I wanted to be the old ball coach that ran summer camps, and this was going to be my mission, is I was going to be the impact that I made, or that people made on me, to others. And so I get in it. The best man at my wedding, who I talked about earlier, Jeff McIntosh, convinces me that I should live in his living room in Riverside. And so I moved to Riverside, and he's assistant coach at California Baptist, and I'm working at Riverside Poly High School, and we just start the grind. We start coaching, working guys out, and we're having success. I'm having success. We turned Riverside Poly's high school program into a basketball program, which hadn't seen that in 35 years since Reggie Miller had been there. And I was coaching really high-level club basketball, and the goal was, all right, now I've spent 4 years in this, and I'm starting to get in the conversation for these high school jobs, and I'm starting to identify which ones I want, and I pretty much had a resume that I could do it. And along the way, people were like, you got to coach college. You got to coach college. And I'm like, dude, those guys are miserable. They spend all this time away from their families. They do this, they do that. It's not that serious for me. It's more purpose-driven. I'm trying to use basketball as a tool to show people who Christ is. And more people push, and now I'm coaching better players every year because they're getting better, and better players want to play in the programs that I'm associated with, and that's great. And I go, but for me, I didn't want to coach college because of my family. Everything I just talked about the way I was raised, it was a no-go.
Yeah.
And so one day my wife's like, you got to go. You got to go do it. If you don't, who knows what's going to happen? And I'm like, are you sure? And so naturally, I mean, at the time I was coaching for West Coast Elite, which is a Under Armour sponsored program, and we had McDonald's All-Americans and future NBA draft picks and 60 plus Division I players. And I'm thinking, well, then I'm going to get the Division I job. And I had 7 interviews at Division I schools. And I quickly realized that in college athletics, if you're getting an interview, it's just to be nice. And so I end up taking a job at Vanguard University for a good friend of mine, Rhett Soliday. And I go from basically the top of this high school grassroots club basketball world to sleeping on his floor for $700 every 2 weeks at Vanguard. And thankful for them for the opportunity. And basically I was engaged at the time. I'm like, okay, you want to get in this? You sure you want our first year of marriage to be this? And so we were engaged the whole time. My wife was in grad school, and I just grinded. And I told Red, I said, hey, I'm 2 feet in, and don't worry about extra income. Like, let's go for it. And if we're good, then it'll all pay off. And so I'm at Vanguard for a year. We have one of the best years in school history. We start 16-0. We are top 5 in the country most of the years. Had a couple battles with a good friend of yours.
Yeah, Kelvin
at Masters, some bloodbaths, some GSAC basketball.
Man.
And
both you're in that small gym too, right? Because they're building a new one now.
Yeah, they're building it, but the pit.
But that thing was tiny, and so is Masters. Masters pretty small, so those loud environment.
Oh, we had an all-timer at our place, and people don't know this. The fire capacity in Vanguard's gym, like on the wall, is 900. That's how many people could fit if there was the worst case scenario. Yeah. So you're talking, you get 50 people in the gym and it's packed.
Yeah.
And so that goes great. And sure enough, 7 months later, I've got 3 people are approaching me for 3 different Division I jobs. And I'm like, here we go. And what I didn't realize at the time is my whole purpose was now not the forefront. I was getting married. We just had success. I'd gotten turned down for some Division I stuff, so there's a little chip on my shoulder, like, I'm going to show you guys. I'm going to make you guys pay. And I was fortunate to get the opportunity to go to Cal Poly. And so it was like a 500% raise. And it was like perfect timing. And I got the job 4 months before my wedding. And we moved up to San Luis Obispo, and it was great. And I have a lot of really fond memories of San Luis Obispo, and I have some great relationships up there, but I just about 2 years in realized that for no other reason than myself is what I was trying to do was no longer a thing. Everything was being weighted on if we won or lost. And if our players weren't good enough, we had to go get better ones. And, I had spent so far 4 or 5 years of my coaching career, and then going back to being an NBC camp counselor. So I've been coaching 10 years at this point. People are like, well, how are you in your place? Well, a lot of people start coaching when they're 23, and they're like, what now? I started coaching when I was 18. Yeah. So I was so far ahead of my peers. But as it relates to Cal Poly, I just realized this isn't why I was doing it. And at the time, it's 2020, 2021, and COVID's going on, and buttons are being pushed federally, and so it wasn't Cal Poly's fault, but our governor is mandating things, and there's some pressure there, and there's some hard conversations going on, and you just get to a place where, like, is this what God actually called? Am I even doing what God called me to do anymore? I'm a 16-year-old kid who basically has his life saved by friendship, the Lord, basketball, and these people inviting me to church, and then letting basketball kind of build my life. And now you fast forward, I'm 29 years old, And it's like, this isn't it. And so I got to a place where I was so at peace. That season, a lot of people in like their most unsure moments, it's like a test of their relationship with God, I think. And man, I'm pleased with who I was. My wife and I have never been more palms up to the Lord. Like, if this is what we're supposed to do, you've provided. We were getting married. You gave me 500% raise. You know, I was about, every timeline that God's provided. And so who are we now when we've gotten everything we've asked for? I'm making the most money I've ever made. I'm a Division I coach. I'm traveling. I'm recruiting. I should be the most fulfilled I've ever been, and I'm literally empty in my career to the point where I was ready to walk away. And I was like, this isn't what God designed me to do. I'm not representing God, and I'm not building everyone's like, well, what's your career goals? I have no career goals. I have family goals. Like, going back to what, Fred Kroll shared with me, my goal is to provide something I didn't have in my family. And so if the career doesn't line up with that stuff can go. And so I was offered a mortgage position in Idaho, and I was going to take it. I was really close, and I had gotten back from a recruiting trip, and I was like, this is it. We had booked plane tickets. We were going to go see it. We had real estate agents showing us neighborhoods, and this is what we were going to do, and I was at peace with it. I didn't like it. I was still trying to ask the guy, so I can still coach high school? He's like, well, maybe a few years after you get your stuff figured out. And then as soon as I got home, the next day I got a call from Matt Logie at Point Loma. He's like, hey, my assistant left. I'd like you to come take the job. And we talked for about an hour and a half.
How'd you know Matt? What was the connection there?
Yeah, so when I worked for NBC camps, our premier camp I ended up being a director of, which was 60 invite-only campers. And our job was to create a college-like experience. So it was a 6-day training camp, and it was intense, man. It was hard. 7 a.m. we're working out, breakfast, and then they're going into individual workouts until lunch. After lunch, they've got a team practice, and that's where Matt comes in. So I would hire, the camp would hire college coaches to come in and now run these practices. Oh, wow. And so these kids are really good high school players, but now Matt Logie, the head coach at Whitworth University, they got to run a practice with him. And with 60 kids, it's only 20 people. It's actually giving you that college-like experience. And then at night, we would always say at NBC, we're going to teach such good basketball so we can tell people about Jesus. It's going to be so sharp. And then at the end of the week, why wouldn't I listen to that guy about Jesus?
Yeah, that's good. Love that.
And so I met Matt through there, and he had tried to get me to come to Whitworth a couple times, and it just was the wrong timing. And then he got the Point Loma job 3 weeks after I took the Cal Poly job, so it's just ships in the night again. And then he's like, dude, you should do this. And I was like, man, I don't know. I'd been so scarred, and we all were. Who knew where California was going at that point? Yeah. If anything, you could predict it right now. It could have been worse than it is now, and maybe it still does. But we were pretty set on this isn't where we're raising our family, and hoops isn't in the cards. And I was being offered some good money, and it was like, I didn't have money. What's money like? And so everyone thinks it's easy to say now that I'm the head coach, but as we get to that part of the story, it was going to require me to take a $40,000 pay cut in an area of the country that had just passed San Francisco in cost of living.
Yes.
And so I thought it was expensive in San Luis Obispo, and then I start looking at properties down here, and I'm like, what are we going to do? And so Matt convinces me to come down and drive down, and my whole decision has become about people. You can have your division, you can have your money, you can have everything. I'm going to surround myself with the people to help raise my family and that I can align with, and that are going to allow me, if basketball's the deal, I'm going to be aligned with you so that I can go after what I want to go after in this and what I feel God's calling me to do. That's good. Because there's been so many situations where I'm just not, you don't align with me, you're going to hold me back. Mm-hmm. And I'm going to tiptoe around you, and we're going to have Bible study in the closet. And so I come down, and I'm at Point Loma Nazarene, and I'm just like, okay, this is silly. The people here are awesome. They align with everything I do. And, having been in the Christian university system at Vanguard and at William Jessup, I also was very aware of, there are some situations where athletes are not accepted at these schools. And I had seen that experience at places. And so I wanted to make sure that, okay, are we really being encouraged to do this? And credit to our athletic director, Ethan Hamilton, and President Bob Brower that have built a culture where that's not going on there. And so that immediately sparked my interest. And so the guy that had offered me the mortgage position was the guy that used to coach me in these camps growing up. Mm-hmm. And so he was the founder's son, and he went into mortgage instead of basketball. And he's like, let's go. And I called him, and I said, I don't know what to do. And he goes, I'll make it really easy on you. You don't have a job offer anymore. And I was like, come on. He's like, no, seriously, you're not ready. Go do it.
That's cool.
And so I hung up the phone, and I'm like, I guess we're moving to San Diego. Wow. And so we moved to San Diego a year and a half ago. And
as the assistant
for Matt. And we have just an incredible year. We had a special group of guys. We took advantage of all these COVID years. We had 6 guys that were in their 5th year of eligibility because of COVID. Yeah. And so we had a bunch of grown men. Yeah. And guys that were fired up for the Lord and guys that were doing it right. And we ended up having a historic year. And we won 25 games in a row. We were ranked number 4 in the country. We hosted the regional tournament. And it didn't go our way. It ended with injury. But when we left that locker room that night in March, and we expected to win the national championship, and we can say if or not, but if healthy, we feel like we would have. Yeah. But we left, and there's not one guy in the room that was going to be defined by that. And that moment, I was like, we're accomplishing our mission. Every guy. And the team we played against, I'm not sure they could have said that. They would have lost that game. It might have been all for nothing. And that's okay. Basketball doesn't have to be a ministry for everybody. Basketball can be a business, and it can be that. But for us, we weren't defined there. And whether we won the national championship or lost in the Sweet 16 like we did, we're comfortable with where the chips were laid.
That's a big deal, man, when you talk about building a culture. And you just mentioned the even business of basketball. Division II is probably the purest form at this point of college. And when you look at Division I, right, sure. you have the NIL situation going on, name, image, likeness, money. For those of you that don't know what that is, it's a big deal that really has turned a college sport into a professional sport, sure. For all intent and purposes. So a lot of people, that's the big argument right now is it's just so polluted that, these athletes and everything else that we're dealing with, when you watch, TV and you see, it's like it's not the pure form that we all love so much. Right. We love the amateur aspect of it. Now you're at the highest level of that. Sure. Really, right? D2, incredible program. And what are you seeing right now when you talk about recruiting athletes that fit, right? They got to fit. Yeah. There's got to be a challenge in finding the right athletes that aren't thinking, oh, I should be at Division I getting all this money, but okay, I'll come here. But man, what is your kind of cultural pitch to these guys? How are you doing in recruiting?
Yeah. Well, we're doing well. First of all, I think while everybody else is trying to convince and sell these kids, I think we've taken the opposite approach. Yeah. We've had a number of Zoom calls, even as recent as the last few weeks, where it's our first contact with them. We are very upfront in who we are. And if it makes you flinch, then you're probably not our guy. It's pretty easily, it's from a non-basketball perspective, right? There's a talent quotient that goes in it, right? I love these social media basketball guys that are like, if you want to get recruited, dive on the floor. Well, and score 30.
Yeah, right.
There's an hey, if you want to get recruited, cheer on the bench. Why are you on the bench? So there's a talent quotient that goes in that. Once we've identified, okay, this guy's good, and just so people, we're recruiting every single guy on our roster that you'll see play in the rotation this year, was probably offered a Division I scholarship and turned it down. And so some more than one. But after the talent quotient's identified, that's the easy part, 5-10 minutes of the game. We go straight into our program pillars. And for us, you have to be all 4 or you're out. It's not like, well, he's 3, coach. Nope, all 4. And the first one is faith. One of the great things about working at Point Loma is we get to scream, yeah, hey, we love having a relationship with Jesus Christ.
That's awesome, yeah.
That is who we are. That is what our truth is. And that is what the truth is. That is what the Bible says is having a relationship with Jesus, and that he died on the cross for our sins. And so that's our starting point. Now, there's guys that have grown up in the church that are like, Coach, let's talk about the literary context of Romans day 1. Yeah. And I'm like, whew, okay. And then there's a guy that's like, Coach, we're in San Diego right now. It's raining. Probably God doesn't exist, does he? Mm-hmm. No, he does, remember? Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah, okay, we're good. Yeah, and so saying all that to say, like, everybody's starting point's different, but we're all starting there. And even if that's not what you believe every single day, we believe it. But that also goes, we want to have faith in our teammates. We want to have faith in our coaching staff. We want to have faith in our faculty. And a lot of that is replicated just like your relationship with God. And so they all kind of go hand in hand. Well, your faith in God's not going to be very strong if you haven't been through some adversity with him, if you haven't spent some time with him, if you haven't read about him, right? Same's kind of true with your teammates. Hey, have faith in your teammate. I know you went to junior college and you're in high school and now you guys are on the same floor. Have faith in each other. No. But we'll put you in the fire right away and we'll make you earn some faith in them. The second one is love. And we're talking about, we don't have a problem recruiting guys that like encourage each other and that are good dudes. Like, kind of goes hand in hand with the first one. Mm-hmm. Like you got faith. But like loving each other really hard. Like some of those relationships I was talking about earlier, like, hey, I know you're going through some adversity, but so what? Yeah. We have a standard here. We're being held to it. Like we're talking about real brotherly love. Like the one where when the red team walks in the gym, if they dare make the joke that I just made 5 seconds ago, like that's not allowed. Mm-hmm. That's my brother. Only I get to talk about him that way. Yeah. And that's pretty easy to see right away when we recruit. The third one is discipline. And so discipline, in our program, we always say discipline's greater than motivation, right? We don't want guys that are in their jersey after the game like, oh, I had a bad game. I got to get more shots. Like, why did you get more shots before the game? Why did you have a bad night? Like, you should have been disciplined in your approach to start it. And so, we want guys that have demonstrated that. But the biggest one and the last one is sacrifice. We've got an ocean that we can see from our campus. Mm-hmm. I'm fortunate to coach in a program that have had a lot of people lay the foundation for we got regional banners, we've got NAI success, we've got Division II success, we've got, we've identified ourselves, we're going to be one of the premier programs in the West Coast, if not the nation, every year. I'm thankful for that. But going in with that, like, it's got to be about that. Yeah. And it's got to be about what that represents. And so to go back to it, basically what we've taken is this mindset of we want to act and we want to have these pillars. Why do we want to do it? So that we go, why are you guys different? How'd you guys go 29-4 and win 25 in a row? It wasn't just talent. Like, we're not playing for ourselves. Not only we're playing for our teammate, but let me tell you about God. Let me tell you about this. And we've got strong believers on our team that are bringing guys to church. We're encouraging guys to bring people to church for all the same reasons that we've already talked about. But for us, that pool gets really small quick. Yeah. Hey, are you talented? Okay, now if you're not 4 out of 4, you're gone. Yeah. But what we found is in today's culture, in today's climate, that when we do find that kid, they're in on us. Mm-hmm. And if the kid's in on us, it's going to be great.
That's so big to have that up front. Hey, this is where we're at. This is who we are. This is what we believe. Because there's plenty of colleges out there and basketball programs, and their college has Christian in the name, but they ain't Christian. I mean, let's be honest. And so that's a big deal that you stand strong on that, and it's even a filter that you guys are able to use to get the right talent in there. And when I think about basketball coach, I know my college basketball coach was a mentor, and he really pastored us. And that's what you're doing. You're pastoring these young men.
Sure.
As you guide them, mentoring them through, so many things in such a critical time in life. And here you are, you could just coach. I'll just coach you, show up practice, do all those things. Okay, great. But you're doing extra things. And that's something that I want you to talk a little bit about your Champions Conference.
Yeah.
I think that's a big deal that is an add-on that is vital, but people don't, a lot of coaches wouldn't do that.
Yeah.
So talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, so we had our first one this morning. Champions Conference, a lot of people would think is about, okay, well, this is the conference that's going to separate us, and now we're going to be so good at basketball in this conference, and this is how we become champions. We believe you become a champion with nothing to do with basketball long before you're crowned a champion. And so we introduced it today, and we're talking about the hard stuff that comes with that. We're talking about the battles that you've been through with God, with your family. We're talking about adversity. We're talking about, okay, we're going to become warriors for God, right? Not just people that are like God's teammates and high five people.
Yeah.
Like, we are warriors through all the battle, no matter what's thrown at us. How do we do that? We've got 18-year-olds in our program that are first time away from home. They're coming from a high school schedule that's like, here's your day, and then you go to practice, and then you do it again tomorrow. And now they have freedom, right? They get to do that. They get to make their own schedule. And so what we're doing in our Champions Conference is every Wednesday morning, we take about 45 minutes, and our pattern is skill, drill, discuss. And so we're going to do a 5-minute skill, right? So this morning, we introduced our gratitude journal. So each guy wrote down 5 things that they were grateful for. And then on the other side of the paper, they wrote down 1 thing they're learning from a challenge in their life right now. And so, okay, that's challenging. What's going on? What are you learning?
That's good.
And so it's really easy day 1, but they're not allowed to list the same thing every week. So now as we get into like week 8, week 9, now they're on like 45 things, and now you're being thankful for like the window because you can see the ocean. And now you start operating from your life because your gratitude's really a muscle that you have to exercise. Like, man, I'm thankful that we get to go to school by an ocean. You were thankful in the recruiting process, but are you thankful as we're doing conditioning? Yeah. And so then we go to our drill or our workshop or our lecture guest speaker. And so then we spend about 30 minutes and we bring in either a guest speaker, or today it was all about, the theme was owning your schedule. Like, what does it look like to actually own my schedule? Because a lot of people give kids these hard time, like, you got 24 hours in a day. What do you mean you can't get extra shots up and you can't get study hall in? And it's like, have you looked at their weekly overview? Yeah. They got 15 units practice. Where do you fit everything in? And so we're teaching them, like, hey, we give study hall hours, they're required. That's a thing. These programs are like 12 hours a week, study hall, get a 4.0. It's like, how are you teaching the kids to have a real schedule? And you're actually getting a worse player because they're miserable, they're worn down. And so we're teaching guys, like, hey, here's your study hall hours, but from like 6 to 9 on Wednesday, that's kind of your last opening for the rest of the week. So I know it's not due until Sunday, but if you don't finish it in that window, you're going to be struggling. And so then we go from there to discuss. And so each player on our team is broken up into what we call a pod, and our assistant coaches are the leader of each pod, and now they discuss everything that they just learned.
Nice.
And so there's no curriculum to it. Our palms are wide open to the sky, to God, and just saying, what does this team need this week? Who does this team need to hear for? Certainly it's not me every week. They're hearing from me every day at practice, in the weight room, conditioning. But who needs to be in these guys' lives right now as we go on this journey and, finish with? And then the other part of it is they all get a binder. And so what the binder is it's not our Point Loma men's basketball manual on how to live your life. It's your manual. This is your words, right? So as we create mission statements, as we create purpose statements, as we do gratitude journals, as we build self-affirmation logs, yours and yours don't look the same, right? So it's the same principles. We're all coming from the same place, but in 10 years, I hope what our program exemplifies is through stuff like this Champions Conference, they have this binder of this manual on how to go be a doctor for Christ.
Yeah.
Another basketball coach for Christ, a lawyer, whoever it is. And now we're creating these leaders that have principles and standards and things that they've gone through themselves.
Yeah, and that's what you're doing. You're making champions for Christ in every area of culture, wherever they might go, like you said. And that's something that's just missing in a lot of sports programs. And that's why yours is really elite in that way. And it's going to be.
People are scared of it.
Yeah.
They think it's going to run people away.
And it's such an important aspect of it. It's such a, not just an add-on, it's core to what you're doing. And that's probably a question I would have for you. It's pretty obvious from this, but what is your desire for your kids? A lot of coaches say, I want them to win. Okay, but what is your desire for your kids? You know, your kids in terms of when they graduate.
Yeah. So we always say we're a development program.
Yeah.
That's who we are. What's Point Loma men's basketball? They're a development program. They really develop. What does that mean? Well, player development. We want to be the best at player development. So let's meet on it. And so we're not like a system program. Like, hey, come run Point Loma men's basketball system, and then you'll score 15 points a game and get a professional contract. If our players aren't getting better and our players aren't very good, we're not going to be very good because it's required. Everything we're doing is requiring them to be good players, and so we have to develop them well. The second thing is academics. We want to make sure that they're leaving with a degree that they can apply, and that we're giving them the resources, right? What I'm stepping into that's off to a good start, and we want to elevate it, is we have an alumni association. So you want to go into this? I guarantee someone from Point Loma men's basketball is already in there, right? So not only get your degree, but let's start feeding you into that because they're already a leg up. Personal, right? What we're talking about in this Champions Conference, leadership, how to talk to how to go through the family stuff that I had to go through, right? Other people have to go through, and you know, I certainly, you know, we talked about some of the guys on our team that have had tough background. How do you deal with that stuff? Building those skills. And then spiritual, right? Spiritual development. Like, what does it look like? And for us, the way we attack it is this term called growth systems. And so growth systems for us are defined as a set of habits and principles and daily routines that equals subconscious growth. Like for you, what's a growth system Pastor McGarity has in his life that works? I would say most people are really good at personal hygiene. They don't have to think about brushing their teeth. Some guys need some work. Yeah. But most people would wake up in the morning and they don't think about taking a shower. They don't think about brushing their teeth. They don't think about flossing their teeth, putting deodorant. They just do it. So how do we create inside all of these things growth systems to where I wake up and I read the Bible? I know Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, I'm waking up at 5. I'm getting to the gym at 5:30, and my first 45 minutes is in the Word. I don't have to think about it. And so how do we create those in your nutrition and your strength and conditioning and all of these things that we go?
Fantastic.
And so that way, and then the great thing about a growth system is you should grow out of it. In college, it was a daily devotion. That was a great growth system for where you're at in your faith. And now, for me, I'm 4 years into my marriage. I'm leading a basketball program. I need a lot more than a devotion. Like, God, I need more. I want to read stories. I need to hire someone to come run a Bible study for us. Like, I need to make sure I'm at men's breakfast on Saturday. That growth system's got to expand. And so it's never changing, and that's life. Yeah. There's no finish line.
That's good, man. That's good. It's so encouraging what you're doing. And let me ask you a couple quick, rapid-fire questions.
Yeah, let's do it.
Other than the Bible, because that's obviously a really influential book, what is a book that has highly influenced you that you would give as a gift to someone?
Yeah. From just a life standpoint, I'm a big fan of John Gordon's stuff. The Energy Bus is a fantastic one. Yeah. He's so good at telling stories that are kind of childish, but it dumbs it down for you. Yeah. The No Complaining Rule is a good one by him. Training Camp's a good one by him. But really, once you pick up one, I haven't met one guy that's like, yeah, I read that book by John Gordon. It's like, well, what's next? Lead for God's Sake is a really good one. talking about a coach that gets wrapped up in his identity in it. And long story short, a janitor changes his life through his faith. And so I think that's a fantastic one. I think Bob Goff's one of my favorite writers. He's fantastic, especially those who are building a young family and trying to find, okay, I know who I am. My wife knows who she is. Who are we as a family? I think he's fantastic. And then from a coaching standpoint, the talent code and the culture code. If you were looking to really learn how to develop talent and bring it out of people, I thought those two books. If you could break down where we get a lot of our player development systems, I would say it comes from those two books.
Yeah, those are good. I wrote a couple books. That's fine. But listen,
I got to get on those. Hey, my wife was in the gift shop after church the other day. Hey.
I'll give you a couple minutes. We'll get you going. Let me ask you another one. If there's a big billboard that you could put anything on it, what would it say?
What would it say? That's fantastic. It's a great question, and it's simple because a lot of the stuff it takes an hour to listen to. But like, if you could just see the billboard, I would say the question that you've got to start with, and the very simplest thing is why. Like, where does that go?
Yeah.
Like, you just see why on a billboard. Like, why are you trying? Why are you going where you're going?
Yeah, that's a good question right there.
And you ask anybody why, they might start telling you about their day-to-day life, and they might start telling you about, well, I don't know why I got to this point in my career.
Yeah.
Right? But why?
It's good. What are you better now at saying no to now at this stage of your life?
There is no extra stuff in my life. If it is not faith, family, hoops, social, and then whatever I can do to serve from there, there's probably some people with their feelings hurt because they don't hear from me as much, but I have done such a better job in the recent 15 months, 18 months of just cutting everything that doesn't align with that.
Now, you're young coach. You're one of the youngest coaches at Division II level, aren't you?
Yeah, I don't know a guy that's younger than me coaching, that's in his head coaching chair.
Yeah,
personally,
and so
I don't.
Even that is a thing
Sure.
because when you think about that, it's not. You got the Point Loma job. This is a highly coveted job. Now, people that know basketball know that, but people that maybe don't understand that are watching or listening, you don't understand how coveted this job is. There's a myriad of reasons. One, it's the location is second to none. Literally, you mentioned the ocean a few times, but it's literally on the cliffs of the ocean. If you've seen the baseball stadium there, you can hit a home run into the water. It seems like it's literally hanging over the edge there. It's just incredible. The basketball gym is right there. You can see out to you go outside the gym, it's just right there. You got the ocean. It's a beautiful, incredible place. But it's San Diego, all of that stuff. But, I mean, that's a God thing in itself. Yeah. And I think that's something that when you look at that opportunity and you go, man, I am there has to be times where you're just like, Lord. Because, I mean, that's you can't say, I did this, I did that, and I earned, because, I mean, you worked your tail off, no question about that. But God has opened these doors because you've been faithful. Yep. You're putting God first. And Point Loma, this is a college, this is a university that lately had a lot of reputation of going south on, whether it was some of the biblical stuff that was being taught. But it seems like they've kind of started to right the ship with people they're bringing in. Ethan is incredible, longtime family friend. I feel like I'm part of the Hamilton family because my mentor, Jack, his dad, he's amazing. And then you have other people there. Some of them are Skyliners that really trying to make sure that place stays what it originally was, which was a Christ-centered university, and where they're going to train people up to be champions for Christ in the culture. And God it's like he's anointed you for this time and just said, you're going to be the guy. And stay true, stay on task, stay doing. And Justin, man, I just praise God for you, honestly, that he's brought you here for such a time as this. I praise God that, in California, we need more warriors, and
Dude.
You're a warrior, and you're raising up warriors. So, man, I just want to say thank you. We appreciate you so much.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for coming on Faith and Culture, man.
We got to get some fans in the stands. So.
Hey, let's get the website where they can get the schedule.
Okay.
And let them know where it's the schedule so we can get it and get out there and support
We've got the
you.
most home games in the history of Point Loma men's
Sweet.
basketball this year. 16 out of 28. So there's
come
no
on.
excuses. No excuses.
That's awesome.
So we're gonna be partying in Golden Gym a lot this year.
That's awesome. So the Point Loma University website under athletics, we'll find basketball. We'll be able to get the schedule.
Absolutely. It's all posted and ready to go.
Oh, I'm excited, man. It's going to be a good year. Well, we appreciate you so much. And hey, folks, be praying for Justin. Be praying for the Point Loma team. And we got more warriors out there on Faith and Culture. They're out here sharing their faith in our culture. Thank you for joining us for another episode of Faith and Culture. We'll see you next time, guys. God bless you.